5 games on the slate for this weekend. Friday's going to kick off with San Diego Wave and Racing Louisville at 10 p.m. Eastern. Saturday with a doubleheader, Houston Dash and Chicago Red Stars kicking off at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Portland Thorns, Gotham FC. Saturday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Washington Spirit versus Orlando are going to kick things off on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And Kansas City Current versus Oil Reign closing things out Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. But we are breaking things down with perhaps maybe biggest matchups that we're keeping an eye on this weekend. We've got 3 that we're keeping a close eye on. So let's start with Portland Thorns FC versus New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC. This one's kicking off on the Saturday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Just to remind everyone, when I'm looking at this one, Lori, we're making our picks. Lisa and I usually makes picks, so I'm going to ask you for a pick in this game as well. And we usually try to go like win, loss. I try to limit myself to like one draw pick. But when I'm looking at this game, this has like been a very interesting window of time for NWSL, because one of the things that we've been talking about as we cover these matches and previewing them here in July is the fact that there's a lot of opportunity here for players in the NWSL during this month of July, because there's a ton of typical starters or key players, right? Internationals who are out on duty for whether it's CONCACAF Championship, Euros, African Women's Cup, Copa America Femenina. We've got players all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. So with all these players missing, it's like there's been the opportunity to see some players kind of step up and sort of take, the moment in front of them. And I've been really impressed with what we've seen out of the Portland Thorns so far. Going into this break, when we were out in LA talking a lot about it, did a couple segments. I was really excited to see the continued development of Yasmin Ryan, kind of in her sophomore season here in the league, and she went and got that late game equalizer. So I've enjoyed what we've been seeing from the Thorns, and I really don't think they've missed too much of a step in terms of missing as many players as they have been. So when I'm looking at this one, I'm looking at the Thorns to take the win in this one. Who do you got?
Yeah, I've got the Thorns too, and I think it's interesting that you bring that up about this period in time and how well they've done. I think this is 7-game unbeaten streak, and they're vying for that top spot, right? And especially could, I think, essentially take it if what happens in the San Diego game. However, I think this is really an interesting conversation about the Thorns, because they did this last year as well, even though it was under Mark Parsons. They have established, I think, the principles and how they want to play, and credit to Rhian Wilkinson, because that's difficult to come into an environment of a team that's already been successful, right? And can make some few tweaks, not too many, and continue that rhythm and momentum for a successful team. And she's done that with changing the formation. But this is a team that players step in, even if they haven't had a ton of minutes. When players are gone, they know the roles, they compete for those spots, and they do their job. And I was thinking Yasmin Ryan as well was one of those players I think has come in and done really well, has had a major upside, huge ceiling, hadn't gotten a ton of minutes consistently given the players that were playing in that position. Mm-hmm. She stepped in. Kelly Hubley, you want to give a shout out as well. I think she continuously steps up as a leader in that back line for the Thorns when you're missing some of the bigger name players. And then just briefly on Gotham, I think, I feel like a team that hasn't quite been able to get a rhythm, but great pickup for Taylor Smith, winner. That was their first win in a while, right? And this is a team, I think, if I'm correct in the numbers, out of their 4 wins, 3 of those have been on the road. So they do perform.
They play a little bit better away from.
Yeah, there's something about that. I do think, and also with last point, Sam Coffey being called up, awesome. Huge fan of hers since day one. But she has been consistent.
But that's going to be a big hole for them.
Who can establish that positioning, kind of be that holding mid that she has been. So I think those are the question marks about Portland. But they are at home. They still have the players like Ryan and Hubley, I think, leading the way that we just talked about. So I still give them advantage, the Thorns this week.
Yeah, I like it. It feels good. I love the points you made too about Gotham. We'll see if Smith has another big game for Gotham. Sometimes a player changing environment, that's what they need moving forward. And a team like Gotham looking for this sort of attacking minded player who can kind of get in there and kind of shake things up. Maybe it's going to work to their benefit, as they look ahead to their second half of the season. So we'll see. We'll see if we were correct in our takes. Other biggest matchup that we're going to be looking at during this time is Washington Spirit versus Orlando Pride. This one kicking off at 5 p.m. Eastern. maybe folks are like, why the pride and why the spirit? Two teams that are kind of finding their own kind of struggles a little bit in different ways, so to speak, in this one. And I'm not gonna lie, I was going a little back and forth, and I was a little curious about like what my pick was going to be in this one, but I think I'm gonna try to go towards Orlando in this one. I think I'm just gonna tip my hat in their favor. They have been putting together some results. They're undefeated in their last couple games, coming off of that draw that they had at their Soccer Fest in Daytona, getting that narrow win against Houston. And this is unfortunately a Washington Spirit side that has, I think we can now say, has been struggling all season to an extent, not just recently. I mean, they started out their season going all the way to the Challenge Cup, just coming up short, having a very match load heavy type of schedule to begin their first half of the season. And their team right now is navigating this month of July without so many of their typical starters. And I think it was maybe a little bit of a heartbreaker, perhaps, to drop the game that they dropped last week against Kansas City, because again, it's those narrow score lines that get you. But just thinking about it and just sort of based on form, I'm going to be leaning and tipping my hat towards Orlando Pride in this one. How about you?
I like that. Well, I think Lucy might be with you because in the comments, Washington hasn't won a game since 1962. Fair enough.
You're on fire today, Lucy.
Lucy's got all the jokes. All right. So I'm actually going to go with Washington. I think this is a team, I mean, to all your point, this is actually, this might be a strong word, but I feel like it's been cruel to the Washington Spirit. Heavy season. We saw the games. There was jokes all the time about, are the Spirits play again? Are they playing tonight, right? And it would be like a random Tuesday. So we know how brutal that has been, and some injuries to some key players and some of their depth. It does feel like a tipping point, though, because I think now they're into this heart of the season where they have missed those players for international break. You're having some players. McKeown, I feel like up top, is starting to come in, get more minutes under her belt. She can be a game changer. The only concern right now with Washington is, do they have somebody that can manage the game, right? Like the ebbs and flows for the 90 minutes. I think that's where they get a little bit caught right now, is there's so much youth on their team. I like your pick in Orlando because I do think they still feel really unified with in having some of those leaders. And you have players like Clough who, even though young, are game changers. But I'm going to go with Washington in this one. I do feel like it's
maybe they're due.
Not 1962, but May 1st, since they've lost or won their last game. However, I do feel like this could be their weekend.
So sometimes it is just a combination of that, right? Just the timing of things. Sometimes you're just due, and maybe that's the energy for the Spirit. Maybe they're going to come out with an energy where they're just like, enough, and then just go make it happen. And honestly, I would love to see it. Would love to hop, back on and chat a little NWSL and talk about why I was incorrect, but we'll see how it shakes out. Last one for the biggest matchups this weekend that we're keeping an eye on. We're looking at Kansas City Current versus OL Reign. Current coming off of that narrow win against the Spirit. Reign coming off of that 2-2 come from behind draw against the rivals in Portland Thorns. Listen, I think this is the time. This is the time for both of these teams, which is why we wanted to keep a focus on these two teams during this biggest matchups segment, because ahead of them, they want to try to run this table. Kansas City Current, I think, has been doing enough to ensure that they remain in the conversation of relevancy. And then you've got OL Reign that I think kind of came into this season with a little bit of that expectation placed upon them, right? A lot of talented players on their team. Both teams, missing some players, whether it's due to injury or players who are out on international duty. I would love to see the Reign go and build off of some of that momentum that they had towards the end of that game against Portland and stack up on that a little bit in this game against Kansas City. I was going back and forth on this one. I think I'm saving this one as my draw. There's something about Kansas City. There's something about Kansas City where they have just made it very frustrating to play against. And this Kansas City Current side is a team that has frustrated OL Reign, whether it's going back into last year and now as they're going to maybe embrace them as the 2022 in this season. So they have played the Reign before, pretty closely, pretty tightly. They have frustrated this team in Laura Harvey's side. And I think because of that, they've got capable goal scorers, I think, on each team. Loving what Bennett has been providing this year in her rookie season. Hamilton has always been a bucket for them, so to speak. And then we've got Balser again coming off of that sort of late equalizer for the Reign. So I think there's enough here for it to be kind of an exciting match. And the fact that I think that it's sort of closing out the weekend is they're the team that has to wait to play their game, So I think this one might have the makings of a draw in it, and I'm going with the draw.
Yeah. I'm going with the draw too. I mean,
yeah,
this is like coming into this, like doing the show with you. I was like, oh, that's my one.
Yes, it is.
Listen, I feel really fortunate because I do the local broadcast for Kansas City, and you're right. This is like, I think, what is it? It was a wild roller coaster at the beginning of the year, but 6-game unbeaten streak. Last time they lost was actually against OL Reign at the end of May. And listen, there is something special. One, they've only missing a couple players to international duty, so they were able to keep their core group together. You pick up Kaiser, right? Merrick in the back, who's done really well. And then listen, we all know about the importance of goalkeepers. And AD Franch has been lights out. Oh my God. It has been so fun to watch. I mean, a few weeks ago against Houston, world beater. She was unbelievable. I mean, she's consistently so good. But I think the interesting thing about Kansas City, and I'll speed this up so we don't take forever, but is that they've had some really kind of like unusual mistakes and like odd periods of times in games, like the last minute equalizer from teams. So they were susceptible a little bit defensively, and we've seen a little bit of that still. But they're getting more solidified back there. But then also you have AD Franch, who's just elevated even more, coming up with massive saves. And so that's fine. Like if you're going to have a few of those mistakes, but then you have a goalkeeper, it just builds and builds the momentum and the confidence around everyone. And then obviously you mentioned Hamilton, and goodness gracious, Bennett. I mean, could be along with a DeMello, I think, and like a talk for Rookie of the Year. So, but then listen, OL Reign, so fun. Balser scoring big time goals. You obviously have Jess Fishlock still. Let's not even mention the names that are coming in once the international break ends. Tobin Heath could potentially play this weekend. So listen, I'm going with the draw too. This should be a fun one.
There's a lot. There's a lot of different angles I think you could take in this one, which is why we wanted to include it in our biggest matchups. I'm with you. I think you can make a case, quite frankly, for both teams here. But I love when we do these picks, whether it's I'm doing it with Lisa or you or another guest, and we don't discuss our picks ahead of the episode. And I love that we both saved our draw for this game. That's
gonna be a good game.